Israeli hostages Iair, Sagui, Dekel-Chen, as well as Sasha, Troufanov arrived in Khan Younis today, and they will be handed over to the International Committee of the Red Cross. Dressed in tracksuits, the hostages appeared to be in better shape than the three men released last week and were given a flag and even a certificate. The three are being returned in exchange for 369 Palestinian prisoners and detainees, a swap which erases or eases fears that the agreement could collapse before the end of the 42-day ceasefire. The three were released after nearly 500 days in captivity. All right, let's welcome Professor Isike, who's Christopher Isike, who's the director of the African Center for the Study of the United States at the University of Pretoria. Professor, thank you so much for joining us. So, Trump gives an ultimatum for the afternoon, right? Anticipated release of hostages by Hamas. Let's talk about the inflammatory way that he actually basically said, if Hamas does not release these hostages by midday today, they would be held to pay. And talk to us about this. Hamas could have taken this as a direct threat, especially at the back of what Trump has also said about basically taking over Gaza.
It's actually very inflammatory because it's really very inciting, like you said. Hamas could have taken it seriously, and that could have jeopardized the whole hostage deal and ceasefire agreement. But maybe that's what Trump wants, especially if you read it against his expressed desire to relocate over 2 million Palestinians from the Gaza Strip and rebuild it, in a real estate fashion.
Mm-hmm. The current Gaza, as well as Israel ceasefire, then, Professor, is also expected to lead on to the second phase. Are you still hopeful, then, that 4 weeks in, we will reach the 42-day truce and talks for the next phase would then have been concluded? Because Hamas was reporting quite a wide range of violations of breaches of the current truce as pertaining to the current arrangements, from not only enough aids trucks that were promised as part of the ceasefire deal to actually enter the enclave, to various other issues like reported fighting at some parts of the enclave as well.
Well, when this ceasefire deal was struck, I was not very optimistic that it would go through, not because of lack of willingness on the part of the Palestinians, but I said then that Israel was acting in bad faith because the ambitions, especially that, let me not say Israel as a whole, but the ambitions of Netanyahu is different from what has been agreed on, and the future vision and the vision for the future of that region, right? So I believe that he would do everything he can to sabotage this, especially in the light of endorsement from President Trump to ultimately relocate the Palestinians and make it that region a zone that will be controlled by the U.S. This was a dream scenario for Netanyahu. So the question would be, what is the motivation for him to, allow this ceasefire to hold and go from stage 1 to 2 and 3 in line with the Egypt plan, for example, which is being put in place to ensure that there's a two-state solution? That's not what Netanyahu wants. So there are no surprises for me. I would indeed be surprised if the ceasefire does hold in the three phases, the three stages as agreed.
But what would have to happen then if the ceasefire deal does actually fall through, Professor, after so much work as well as collaboration to ensure that at least some of these hostages as well as those prisoners have been freed?
Well, I think the first thing that will need to happen is for the Gulf states, the other regional actors, to step up and take responsibility and to try and ensure that they support the Palestinians. If we want a rules-based international system, the so-called third world or global south, which in my view is the global majority, should begin to stamp its foot in terms of making contributions to that new-based, rule-based new order that we cherish, and that would mean for them to step up, not just in terms of speaking out, but also in terms of putting their monies where their mouth is. So they would have to take responsibility, come out against the United States and its support for Israel, and ensure that the United States is punished. Much as Trump will want to give the impression that the United States is a unilateral power, it is not. The world is changing. Maybe he doesn't realize it, but the idea of using threats, it's not going to work. It's not going to work for people who are able to know what they can bring to the table, and they do bring things to the table for even the United States of America. It cannot live in isolation of everyone and cannot dictate how the world would go. So ultimately, if everyone stands up, I'm sure that the United States will be forced to back down and support what it had helped put together in the first place.
And it's very interesting, Professor, because apparently human rights groups are saying this could amount to a war crime actually under international law, because we know that Donald Trump has actually even threatened aid against, I think, Egypt, as well as some Iranian countries, saying that if they do not accept these Palestinians, then he's just simply going to withhold aid. Can he do that, though?
He can. He can. People say he's crazy, and I've always said that there's a logic to the craziness in terms of dangling these threats and then getting concessions that he really wants. So the question is, what instruments do these countries have to try and use as bargaining chips? And some of them have quite a bit in their arsenal to be able to push back on some of these threats, because if Trump does go ahead with some of these threats, it also affects the United States. Of course, he wants to ensure that he wins the midterm elections 2 years from 9/26. He wants to ensure that his party carries on to win the 2028 elections. None of this would happen if people suffer from trade tariffs that he seems to be using gleefully right now.
And I mean, how is this then compared to Trump's pronouncement in the issue or the situation in Ukraine as well as Russia? What do you think about this, Professor?
Look, he likes Putin. Let me put it that way. He likes Putin, although he's released some statements that show that he's going to be tough on Putin. But whatever it is that he's doing in the Middle East is not very dissimilar from what Russia is doing in Ukraine.
But how? Because Ukraine, as we've known, Professor, has been the one that actually America has been backing. It was not Russia.
Well, that was Biden's America. This is Trump's America, and there's a difference.
All right, Professor, we're going to leave it there. Thank you so much. As always, a great pleasure just picking your brain there about some of these pertinent issues. That is Professor Christopher Isike, the director at ACSUS University of Pretoria.